Lehman Brothers has filed for bankruptcy, and Bank of America is taking over Merrill Lynch in a $50 billion deal.
The 2008 financial crisis was the worst economic disaster in the US since the Great Depression of 1929. The crisis threatened to destroy the international financial system and caused the failure and near failure of several financial institutions. In the United States, the stock market plummeted, wiping out nearly $8 trillion in value between late 2007 and 2009. Unemployment climbed, peaking at 10% in October of 2009. Americans lost nearly $10 trillion in wealth as their home values plunged and their retirement accounts vaporized. The 2008 financial crisis had its origins in the housing market. After the dot-com bubble, the Federal Reserve lowered the interest rates from 6.5% in 2000 to just 1% in 2003, flooding the economy with cheap and easy money. As a result, home prices skyrocketed as borrowers took advantage of low mortgage rates. And these borrowers included subprime borrowers as well. Now, who were these subprime borrowers? A subprime borrower is a person who is considered to be relatively high credit risk, a person who has a low credit score and a high risk of not making his payments and defaulting. Because of low mortgage rates, even subprime borrowers were able to realize the dream of owning a home. The mortgage market was blowing up, and even people with low incomes were rushing to borrow money to buy their own houses. Simply put, people were living way beyond their means.
I'm in danger!
Then there was also a wide popularity of mortgage-backed securities, also known as MBS. Let's say John wants to own a house and he goes to the bank to get a mortgage. The bank lends him, say, $150,000. Now the bank combines John's mortgage and other people's mortgages and sells this pool of mortgage to a larger bank. The larger bank then sells these mortgages to investors through an instrument known as mortgage-backed securities. Investors can buy mortgage-backed securities through their regular brokerage account. So how does this help the bank? Well, the original bank that loaned John the money is no longer in the picture. John, although he's paying mortgage to the original bank he loaned the money from, but in reality he's paying to the investors, who are the real owners of the mortgage. The bank acted as the middleman. These mortgage-backed securities gained in value when house prices were going up. However, when the housing market crashed in 2007 and 2008 and subprime borrowers defaulted, mortgage-backed securities also lost their value with dire consequences for portfolios of many banks and investment firms. It all started when the Federal Reserve started raising interest rates in 2004, and 2 years later, the interest rates were at 5.25%, where it remained till August 2007. There were signs of distress during the early 2006 when home prices started to fall. Then as 2007 got underway, slowly and gradually, one after another subprime lender filed for bankruptcy. In April 2007, New Century Financial, which specialized in subprime lending, filed for bankruptcy. And that was the start of the domino effect. First came Bear Stearns. In March 2008, Bear Stearns, a global investment bank that dates back to 1923, essentially collapsed and was acquired by JP Morgan for pennies on the dollar. The Federal Reserve agreed to lend JP Morgan $30 billion so it could buy Bear Stearns. Then came the bankruptcy of Lehman Brothers, the 168-year-old investment bank with $639 billion in assets, filed the largest bankruptcy in the US. The fall of Lehman Brothers was a symbol of the devastation caused by the global financial crisis. Its failure created a lasting turmoil in the financial markets worldwide, and it severely weakened the portfolios of banks that had loaned it money and fostered a new distrust amongst banks. Although Lehman Brothers had tried to find a partner or a buyer and had hoped for government's assistance to facilitate a deal, the US government, however, refused to intervene, citing moral hazard. Now here's the really interesting part, and what I call a double standard. Only a day after the US government refused to bail out Lehman Brothers, the government stepped in to save American International Group, also known as AIG, when the government realized that AIG was collapsing and AIG's collapse could bring down the entire financial system. The government poured in more than $180 billion to save the largest insurance institution at that time. AIG's bailout did not come without a controversy. Some questioned whether it was appropriate for the government to use taxpayers' money to purchase a struggling insurance company. The use of public funds to pay out bonuses to AIG's officials in particular caused outrage. Right after taking government's bailout, AIG paid $165 million in bonuses to its executives. You heard that right. $165 million worth of bonuses right after the bailout. Next came Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs, two of the biggest investment banks at that time, and they both borrowed billions of dollars from the government to stabilize their operations. Otherwise, they were in deep trouble as well. Bank of America also received $100 billion from the government so that it could buy Merrill Lynch and Countrywide Financial. By the winter of 2008, the US economy was in a deep recession. The stock markets throughout the world were in a free fall, while White House and the Congress struggled to stop the bleeding and restore people's faith in the economy. To stabilize the markets and the economy, the government established Troubled Asset Relief Program, also known as TARP, where the government purchased troubled assets such as mortgage-backed securities. The TARP program also purchased preferred stocks in other troubled financial institutions, making government the part owner of more than 200 banks by the end of 2008. By the middle of 2009, the financial markets began to revive and the economy had begun to regrow after 2 years of deep recession. During the 2008 financial crisis, President Bush used the term "too big to fail" to describe a company that is deeply linked to the global economy and that its failure could be catastrophic. The Bush administration used this phrase to explain why it had to bail out some of the financial institutions to avoid a worldwide economic collapse. After the financial disaster, the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform Act was introduced to ensure that another crisis of this magnitude would not occur and to prevent more banks from becoming too big to fail. The sole purpose of this council is to look out for risks that could affect the entire financial industry. And so ended the financial disaster of 2008. After the crisis had subsided, Robert Kindler, vice president of Morgan Stanley, had his license plate made as a joke and as a reminder, as he put it, that no one is too big to fail. This drama was a human one. It is a tale about the fallibility of people who thought they themselves were too big to fail.